All right, welcome to The Truth About Fake News. Joining us for this mentor chat is Al Tompkins from the Poynter Institute, senior faculty member there. Al, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Yep.
We appreciate it. You know, this is really, I think, an important part of learning about online media for our social media class in particular is learning what is, what isn't, what's truth, what's not truth, and what is fake news on purpose and what actually isn't. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you've looked at this and where you see this going right now.
Well, a year ago, I didn't like this phrase at all because I didn't think it meant very much. But increasingly, I think it means a lot because fake news is real. I know how odd that sounds to say something like that, but it really is a thing. And it's really causing a lot of disruption, not only for the journalist, but certainly for the user. No doubt you all have seen this ad, but I'm going to give you sort of a taste of it. This is what CNN now feels is so important. They're actually running various versions of this.
This is an apple. Some people might try to tell you that it's a banana. They might scream banana, banana, banana over and over and over again. They might put banana in all caps. You might even start to believe that this is a banana. But it's not. This is an apple.
It's a really interesting ad and a really interesting message. The problem is that when you put yourself on that kind of a pedestal, you start opening yourself to all sorts of microscopic inspection. And so far, it hasn't worked out very well. We've had a bad few weeks of errors and corrections and so on. And it's not unusual for journalists to make mistakes, but when you put yourself up like this under that kind of examination, you know, it causes a certain amount of friction when you don't rise to that occasion. One of the things I would say about fake news is that it's not just news you wish hadn't happened. That often is the case right now, that the Trump administration, for example, will call something fake news when they just disagree with it. Often fake news, absolutely, when it occurs, is motivated by either money or politics. But sometimes fake news also is motivated by the need just to create chaos or to keep you from paying attention to the other stuff that's going on. I often think of news and information in sort of quadrants. So information to me means just factual stuff. It's the facts that we find. Misinformation to me means a misstatement of the facts. The numbers might have changed, or something happened that you got it wrong, or the source got it wrong. But the key here is that with misinformation, there was no ill intent. You didn't mean to get it wrong. You didn't mean to mislead anybody. You just did. As opposed to disinformation. Disinformation to me implies nefarious intent. You meant to get it wrong. You meant to mislead me. You meant to tell me something that wasn't true, and you meant me to tell others that it wasn't true. I think that's by far the most damaging of all these quadrants. And then propaganda, I think, is widely misunderstood. We often have thought of propaganda as being something sort of evil, but I think propaganda also can encompass things like advertising, public relations. And it's difficult sometimes to use those words and to think of there being still nobility around propaganda. But the fact of the matter is, the War Department in World War II used propaganda widely, even co-opted Disney characters to help the American war effort, to sell savings bonds and war bonds. Often advertising, particularly political advertising, goes into propaganda. This person is great. They're going to save your job. They're going to make everything fine that wasn't fine. They're going to be fair, they're going to be open, and they're going to be working for you. Well, no, they're not. They never have, and they never will work for you, because you means everybody, and so on. So it is in fact propaganda. It's self-serving propaganda, but I think we all have a propaganda filter sort of built in, and we understand how this goes. When somebody's trying to sell us a product, they say it's going to be the latest, greatest, and best. It's going to make your hair grow and make you feel young. You know, it might and it might not. We'll have to use our good judgment there.
Now, by far right now, Al, I mean, information still is king. I mean, there is still now more information than all of the other three, is there not? I mean, most local news organizations are pumping out scads of information that is well-reasoned, well-researched, and actually correct.
Well, I hope you're right, but I'm not sure you always are. On this one, I think information sometimes is in the eye of the beholder, and I think there is a legitimate debate to be made about whether or not information out of context is misinformation or disinformation. I think that's our hardest challenge in daily news, is to find the appropriate context to actually fit the facts together in a way that will tell you what you need to know in order to understand them. But around misinformation, it seems to me misinformation is the one that really deserves our deliberate view. The facts changed, the journalist misunderstood, the source misunderstood or exaggerated. The whole idea about misinformation is that I'm attributing this to no ill will. Let me give you an example. So this is a story out of Louisville, and forgive me, there's a lot of text here, but it's going to be worth your time for me to go through this. So let me just read with you here real short, and then we're going to take a look at some different treatments of this story. Again, out of Louisville. Local bar owner to remove NFL memorabilia in reaction to NFL decision not to require players to stand during national anthem. Todd King, the owner of TK's Pub, will be removing NFL memorabilia tomorrow at 4 o'clock, this bar, in response to the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodall not requiring players to stand during or playing the national anthem. One item in particular, one of King's prized possession, a Cleveland Browns football helmet, signed by Browns quarterback and former University of Kentucky football star Tim Couch, is heading for the trash bin. The helmet will be replaced by a folded American flag. King says he was disgusted and appalled last week when he watch the Browns players dishonoring our flag and our veterans by kneeling during the national anthem. He says he was equally disappointed today by the announcement that the NFL will not require its players to stand. That's all I need to read right now. So let's look at a couple of the key things here. He's going to be removing. So this is a news release. Going to be removing his stuff at 4 o'clock. And various news stations took this up. This is the Tegna station there in town, WHAS. At TK's Pub in Louisville, owner Todd King is a straight shooter, it says. We don't like protests of the American flag and the national anthem, he told WHAS 11 of the NFL players who are taking the knee. His feelings are so strong, he's decided to take down and throw away every bit of NFL gear hanging in his business. Okay. So they set him up as a straight shooter, and they say he's going to take down every bit of NFL gear. Now, you haven't seen this story. What's in your mind? What's going to happen here? You're going to go to cover this story at 4 o'clock. What are you going to see?
Well, you're going to see somebody there basically taking everything out, throwing it away. And obviously, if
you envision everything, what are you envisioning?
Well, the jerseys, the helmets, the logos.
I think a reasonable person would see it that way. So let's see
that
what
seems
happens.
reasonable, right?
I think that's reasonable to think that. That's what the press release said. Let's take a look and see what actually happened. Here is version 1 of the story. This is from Wave TV, W-A-V-E. They're in Louisville.
The Wave Country bar owner says kneeling controversies throughout the NFL, touching down here in Wave Country, the outrage leading owners to take a stand. One Wave Country bar owner says he's fed up with all of the politics. He's done with the NFL. He's not turning off the games at his bar, but he says the games are turning off the customers. Wave 3 News reporter David Mattingly bellied up to the bar at TK's near Fern Creek. Is the kneeling controversy really becoming bad for some local business?
Well, it's not helping. I spoke to several barkeeps today who say that the kneeling controversy is actually generating more opinions than the games themselves. At TK's Pub in Fern Creek, it's tough to get a seat at the bar on game day, and even tougher to get a word in edgewise when it comes to players kneeling during the national anthem.
Made me not want to watch football. That's painful in our country, not to watch football.
Owner Todd King says he's fed up with it all. He'll keep the NFL games playing on the screens in his bar, but he's done with watching or caring. And business here is not what it used to be. Monday night football, Sunday games, they're not drawing the crowds in the way they used to. And it's all because, they say, of what's been happening before the game. I heard similar observations at other bars in town. You've got a monitor over here for the games. Either fans aren't paying attention like they used to, or they're not showing up at all. At Molly Malone's in the Highlands, soccer is the big draw. The NFL crowd is on the decline. And it's because of politics?
I think it's the commingling of the politics over the sport rather than just being able to watch the game.
Back at TK's, Todd King says he's had it. We were there as he took down a prize souvenir, a Tim Couch signed helmet from his days playing in Cleveland. After 15 years on the shelf, the helmet went into the trash, and a flag took its place on the shelf. Why take that down now when it meant so much to you?
The flag needs more. Absolutely.
And based on what I heard today, the longer this controversy goes on, the easier it will be for some people to turn to other sports on TV.
All right. Now, so how does this fit with what you expected?
Well, I expected to see people taking everything down and
Well, he did take everything down.
and eliminating the NFL. He's left it playing on. He leaves it playing everywhere. They're still selling.
What
things.
was everything in this case?
Everything was a helmet.
A helmet.
It was a helmet.
A dusty helmet.
A helmet. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which was
And the
put out
helmet
very
ended up in the trash can.
carefully on top of the garbage bin. By the way, they're very not
All
with
right.
props. Very carefully. I'd like to see
Very
where that helmet
carefully,
is now.
yeah. So let's go across town to WDRB and see how they covered this story.
Local bar owner is doing some redecorating out of anger at the NFL players kneeling during the national anthem. The owner of TK's Pub in Fern Creek is upset at the league's decision not to require players to stand. So today he removed all of the NFL memorabilia from his bar. That includes one of his prized possessions, a Cleveland Browns helmet signed by Browns quarterback and former UK star Tim Couch.
American values. This is what people have fought.
Now, wait a minute.
How many
did we
times
just
you can
see?
take that down? But that was a different scene than I saw before.
How's that possible?
A different angle to tell. I don't know. Different cameras. I'm not quite sure.
How many people were involved in removing the dusty helmet in the first?
There was one in the first.
One. How many was
We had
involved?
two.
So there's only one plausible way this could have happened.
I
They took the dusty helmet down.
think it was-
At some point, they cleaned it off and put it back up, and then they took it down again. I don't know what's going on here, but for some reason, somebody retrieved it out of the garbage, cleaned it up, and put it back on the shelf after the first station left.
Yeah, a little bit of a situation. Yeah,
A situation. Yes, it is a situation, to be sure.
We'll redo the photo op. That's yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't be surprised to see this helmet on eBay. I mean, I don't know where it went, but what I do know is it didn't stay in the garbage.
No, I'm guessing it's still up in his bar. I'd like to do
I
a
have
follow.
no idea. Now, is this misinformation or disinformation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's there's that line. It was the reporter said is going there thinking he's got an exclusive, thinking this is the only time this is going to happen, or is it they're playing along hoping for a good story?
Did somebody mean to mislead us here? I would say yes.
I would say yes.
I would say this is disinformation, that this was staged. It wasn't real. It didn't happen the way this station said it happened. It didn't happen. And there's another station in town as well that also did the story. And so this story gets done in print. It gets done by 3 television stations. And in every version, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
We're led to believe that everything he's got is going without ever saying, oh, and by the way, it's only one. We're led to believe that we were there and we saw it when we didn't. I think the Wave TV story, this story, where he takes it down for the first time, and I think it's accurate, but I'm still not sure it's true, because he never holds this guy accountable for saying he's not a news release, saying he was going to take away all of his memorabilia. And when we got there, we found all was one helmet, which, by the way, no longer actually has the signature of Couch on there because somebody used Windex on it years ago and wiped it off. So there's a remnant of the signature on there, but it barely is on the helmet. I think this is. I don't think this is disinformation. I don't think this is just a mistake. I think they meant to mislead us, and this is what I want us to pay a lot more attention to. Because if I can't trust something as silly as this, how am I ever going to trust your reporting on an important story that really does affect my life? This is also happening a lot. So this happened in Indianapolis last week, where this image ended up getting sent all over the place across Indiana, and using the WISH, no, I can't think of what the call letters are. Channel 8, it's WESH TV.
I think that's Wish. I think that's Wish. Yeah, WISH.
It's WESH, right? But Channel 8, they're in Indianapolis. They ended up using their logo and their map and so on. It looks real. It looks right. And by the way, it was interesting because there was actually snow in the forecast on those days, just not 2 inches or 5 inches or 9 inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where did this come from? Well, the TV station ended up having to jump in on Twitter especially, and Facebook too, to say, wait a minute, this snow forecast map from last winter has now been shared 600 times. And they ended up actually posting this from 2014, not a current forecast, alerting people to the fact that somebody had taken last year's forecast page and put it up saying that this was what was coming, when in fact the TV station never said that at all. Mm-hmm. This happens quite a lot.
We see that a lot. The repurposing of images, or the redistributing of images at certain times. When hurricanes came through in the South a few months ago, I saw a picture of former President Obama going through in soup kitchen. This is what President Obama's doing this.
Not only that, but Michelle and the 2 daughters were also standing next to him.
Right. Well, so you see that a lot. That's a lot of
Thanksgiving picture from his last year in office.
Right.
It wasn't. He never went to Houston.
And we get from that to the shark and the floodwater type stuff. Where
the shark and the floodwaters is pretty famous. The photo is actually real. The shark photo is actually real. It just gets photoshopped into the oddest.
Everything.
It's an old National Geographic picture.
Yeah.
This was an image that created huge amounts of disruption. So after Hurricane Harvey followed the storm called Irma, which came here to Florida where I am. But this image and others like it ended up being widely circulated using, as you can see, the NOAA logo up there, saying this was the latest storm track and that Houston was about to get hit again. And it caused real panic, so much so that the NOAA and the Hurricane Center actually addressed this, which is something they rarely do. But they actually addressed this and said, that is not real. That thing that's getting all of that traffic. And you can see down the bottom there, 2,500 reactions just to this image. And it went far larger than that. It was a dominant image in Facebook particularly. This was the actual track at that same moment. Let me show you how easy this is to do. So I'm going to, right here, live in front of you, I'm going to change a news headline in less than 20 seconds with very little effort. So here is this morning's Washington Post: as Democrats add Senate seat, GOP left to cast blame over Alabama failure. So let's see what we can do with this that would be interesting and start a rumor. Why don't we just click on this? We're going to go to inspect. We're going to open up the HTML code, click right into the headline, and let's just change that headline. How about stunning news? Trump orders Alabama to do over the election. And we'll just save this off now, and it will look exactly like the Washington Post just changed the headline. We'll take a snapshot of this, a screen grab of this. We'll post it online. We'll start a rumor. We'll post it on Reddit. We'll post it on 4chan. We'll post it here and there, and we'll have a genuine rumor.
And just like that,
no problem.
It's just now that obviously doesn't change the actual HTML from.
That's right.
From
the Washington
their
Post
site.
And that's even better, because the Washington Post website won't say this. And so what I'll say is, hey, they said it. They know it's true, but they took it down because
I managed to get a screenshot.
Absolutely. This is what they don't want you to see. And then they'll spend the rest of the afternoon trying to fight my rumor. And by then I will have distracted them so much from the story that the story will end up being about the headline. And there'll be a fair number of people who will never figure out that it wasn't real, and they will run off in their conspiracy circles and so on.
Have people started to get more savvy? I mean, have you seen?
It's hard to know.
Or is it still Wild Westy where
40% or more than 40% of the people who voted in Alabama this week said that they didn't believe the allegations of the women against Roy Moore. So, that was fairly overwhelming evidence, and they didn't believe it. It's hard to get people to believe something that they absolutely do not want to believe. It might be in their own selfish interest. It might be in their financial interest. It might be in their political interest. Despite overwhelming evidence that global warming is real, despite overwhelming scientific consensus that this is real, there are still people who don't want it to be true because their jobs or their livelihood or their lifestyle depend on it not to be true. So it's incredibly difficult to get people to change their mind when it's going to cost them their money or their job or their lifestyle. We've seen this over and over again, right? We saw this in tobacco. We saw this in DDT. We saw this in asbestos. We saw this in lead and gasoline. We've seen it over and over again. Right. The whole idea that I don't want to believe it. I like to smoke. Well, you can like to smoke if you want, but you're going to die from it. And by the way, you're killing me too. So fake news often shows up in breaking news because breaking news is moving so fast, right? So this is down in Texas, near San Antonio, at the moment of the church shooting. And this is live on CNN.
Do you know anything about the attacker?
We don't. It was reported to me that he's actually not from this community. Apparently, his name was released as Sam Hyde. That was the name I was given. We don't know any more details.
Okay, so Sam Hyde, according to Representative Vincent Gonzalez, if Representative Gonzalez is telling you that he has information, I'm prone to believe that.
Usually a pretty good source.
So he said the name is Sam Hyde. Well, it turns out that Sam Hyde is a name that is often used as a mass killer. Sam Hyde's actually a comedian. And pranksters often use this name during mass killings to try to get journalists to buy the name and run it. It's like a running online joke. So his name was used in the UCLA. It was named over and over again. They have these photographs showing him as a Klansman and as a gunman of various sorts, neo-Nazi in St. Louis, Oregon shooter, for example, and so on. And so these kinds of things happen quite a lot, that the online rumor community starts these things and then they just take off. And sometimes journalists jump on these things and use them because, hey, I mean, here's a picture of a weird looking guy with a Trump shirt and a Trump hat and a semi-automatic rifle. And well, yeah, it's probably true. But in fact, it's not true, Bill O'Reilly. It's just not true. Sam Hyde is not a shooter. He's a comedian who does a whole lot of pranking and stuff like that. And he gets out there, right?
It's kind of the Howard Sternification of
well, that's actually a very good parallel, right? It's very good parallel. But this thing just goes on and on and on. This whole idea of the rumor. So after the Texas shooting, I put up a couple of screens. I was actually teaching in San Antonio. I said, which of these is real? So this is the Governor Greg Abbott. Concealed carry poses no danger on Texas college campuses. The dire consequences never happened. What would you reckon? There's 1,700 retweets on this one, 2,800 likes, 840 comments. Would you reckon this is real or not?
Oh, well, I mean, it's well shared. I mean, you really need to go in and see if the links actually work. And, it's
real. He actually said this. So the truth is, he actually did post this. It actually showed up on his feed, and he actually said this. He supported the idea of guns on college campuses. So let me give you another one. Right after the Texas shooting, I'm embarrassed. Texas #2 in nation for gun purchases behind California. Let's pick up the pace.
Yeah, that to me sounds fake.
Yeah, you can see they're linking to the San Francisco Chronicle website. Texas request to buy guns tops 1 million per year. So here's the thing. This is a really interesting one, because the story they link to down there on the San Francisco Chronicle, that's a real story. What's not real is Abbott saying he was embarrassed that Texas was lagging behind California. So sometimes when you really want to confuse people, you mix up what's real and what's fake. And it becomes, because if I click on that, I'm going to get a real story, exactly what was promoted. What I'm not going to get is what he said at the top.
Sure.
So that's even more confusing. Well, there's this other one, and this is just sort of how nefarious all of this gets. So this is listed as Jack Sims. Hi, my name is Jack, and this all came up partly because Jack Sims was alleged to have been the shooter in San Antonio or south of San Antonio at the church down there, right? And then Jack Sims says, he's my dad, don't spread lies. He's not the shooter, right? Well, here's the thing. Jack Sims is listed, by the way, in United Kingdom. Here's the thing. Jack Sims is a porn star, a male porn star. And the fellow in the circle up there, the fellow in that profile picture, is a well-known YouTuber who has about 750,000 followers. So Jack Sims is also known as Johnny Sims. And so what they're trying to do is get journalists to pick up the name Jack Sims as the shooter in Texas and to attribute it to this little fellow up here in that circle picture, the profile picture. Why would that be funny? Well, because you're saying that a porn star is the shooter, and you're saying that little guy right there who ends up getting killed off in every mass killing is the son of Jack Sims. So every time there's a mass killing, they end up including him in the dead. And so he shows up all the time. I mean, like all the time. This was a list of the people who were killed in the Ariana Grande bombing. In fact, his name is Review Bra. And Review Bra does reviews of fast food breakthroughs. So, and they're exhaustive reviews. I mean, every time somebody comes out with a new chicken nugget or a new McRib or a new energy drink, he does. Let me give you a sample here.
Right now, we're going to be doing a study regarding energy drinks. We're going to be trying all the main brands, even some smaller ones like Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar, 5-Hour Energy.
And these go on forever. He's well known because he always wears a suit and tie, and he has, as I say, right out of 750,000 YouTube viewers. And they're fascinating. These videos are just fascinating. He's so serious and so methodical that it's just bizarre. But the Reddit crowd and the 4chan crowd use him as a victim all the time, and they kill him off. They start rumors about him and so on. He survives all the same. After the Ariana Grande concert, for example, he had to issue a "I'm still alive" video.
I'm just making this video to let you know that I am indeed alive, well, and okay.
I'm really interested in how people respond to these kinds of things, particularly when there's big conspiracy theories. This one took all of about 2 hours to really bubble up. And that was the 4chaners said, look, there's no doubt of why the shooting occurred where it occurred, because they said this is the beginning of the Grand Mason, the Masonic uprising. The shooting across the parking lot from the Masonic temple there, otherwise known as the Luxor Hotel, and that's where the Sphinx is. And so, of course, they would have to do the mass killing right there in honor of their Egyptian Masonic upbringing. They would have to do the mass killing there. They said it really had nothing to do with the Mandalay Bay. It was actually because it was, standing right. So they said this is the end of times. This is the beginning of the Masonic uprising. I told you the Masons were going to do this, and so that one took off in a very significant way. There was also another big one. Look down there at views. Look, I mean, this is 1.3 or 1,003,000. What would they be called? 1,003,997 views on this very trusted source called the End of Times News Report. Which, by the way, I'm not sure I would ever work for. At least if I did, I'd get paid at the end of every workday.
Yeah, exactly. It's a dead-end job, Al. Dead-end job.
But the rumor was going, they started something called a false flag alert, saying that there were multiple shooters, right? So here's their evidence.
You can clearly see down on the 4th or 5th floor, rapid gunfire being fired on the crowd. This is absolute proof that the story of a single gunman operating on the 32nd floor is false.
Right there, baby. That's fourth floor, not the 32nd.
It took almost 3 days for somebody to find another video of the Mandalay Bay prior to the shooting and show that that reflection was still going on. It turned out it was just a reflection of a flashing light. Now imagine that in Las Vegas, having a flashing light reflect in a window.
Shocking.
That unto itself is something of a miracle.
You can.
The other thing that frequently happens after a mass shooting is, in fact, it happens every time. It's not just frequent. Is this outbreak of people who believe that there were, in fact, no victims. So these are people who believe in something called crisis actors. And these aren't small numbers. I mean, look up there, 197,000 views, 12,000 views, 90,000 views, and so on. These are really, really large audiences of people who don't believe that 9/11 was an attack by terrorists. They don't believe that Newtown actually involved people being killed. They don't believe that people were in Orlando at the Pulse nightclub, and so on. And so they absolutely don't believe that that the Las Vegas shooting went down the way it went down. And so what they do is they drum up people who they say have appeared in multiple of these massive shootings. So this is one of the more famous ones, saying Stephen Paddock in Las Vegas, Stephen Paddock at San Diego, and so on. Here's the oddity of this. If you showed me this was, if I didn't know what you were talking about, you says, is this the same person, without knowing why you were asking me? I could buy that they're the same person. I mean, it's not totally out of any possibility. If you said, look, this is my uncle, 6 months or 10 months or 2 years apart. Okay, and what, So I could believe it, but they do this all the time. And after every disaster, you will see these people accusing them of being a crisis actor. And this is where rumors start. Now, I will also say, though, that there is this one other element. I am at a complete loss to explain to you why we know so little about Stephen Paddock even today. So the single worst mass shooting in the United States from a terrorist, whether you call it a terrorist point of view or not, it's a mass shooting, and it's the worst of these, going back to maybe 100 years. I can't explain to you why we know so little. I can't explain to you why we don't have video from the hotel, which videos everything. Mm-hmm. I can't explain any of that to you, and it doesn't make any sense to me why we don't have that stuff. It doesn't make any sense to me why we don't have pictures and video of him walking into the hotel with his guns and bags and cases. I don't know. Why don't we have that? And so what happens is that in the absence of that evidence, rumors fly. And if you want to believe the rumors, there's plenty of reason to raise questions. And therein lies the problem, So here's what I would recommend for your students as they think about what they're consuming and whether or not they're going to pass that information along. I recommend 4 questions. Question 1, what do we actually know? So what do we know? And I'm asking you to click off the facts that you know at this moment. And then I would ask you to say, what do we need to know? What don't we know? Well, we don't know how you know that. We don't know who else was involved. We don't know why they might have done it, so on. Then I would ask, how do we know what we think we actually know? What were the sources? How do the sources know? What might their motivations be? Why would they say that? Why wouldn't they say something else? How do we actually know what we know? And then finally, is there any other way to look at this? Is there any other possible way you could explain why this is going on or how this happened? Look, I stipulate that most of the time the easiest explanation is the right one. I stipulate that most of the time things aren't very complicated, but sometimes they are. And we have to be open to the idea there could be another way of looking at this. So those 4 questions: what do we know? What do we need to know? How do we know what we think we know? And then finally, is there any other way to look at this? The last thing I would leave you with is this, and that is my hope that we don't turn into cynics. I think skeptics are a healthy way of living, but I think cynicism, which means to me, I don't believe anybody. I think that's toxic, and I think that will keep you from discovering any truth at all. So I urge your students to be open to truth, but don't trust what somebody says just because it sounds right. Ask 4 critical questions. I fear that we are coming into a time, if we're not already there, when the whole idea of conversation and evidence doesn't change anybody's mind. That I'm intractable. I see my opinion as being the only plausible way of looking at this, and I just won't change my mind. And we as journalists, I have to say, add to this. When somebody does change their mind, we call them a flip-flopper. We say, oh, you used to believe this, now you believe that, you just go with the wind. When in fact, I could argue that when confronted with evidence and you change your mind, that's a sign of enlightenment. Mm-hmm. So nobody of your age or my age believes the same thing today that we believed when we were 20. I grew up at a time when the AIDS crisis, for example, was first thought of as a gay disease. It was punishment, for people who were homosexual, and even the president, Reagan, said that originally. So we're in a constant evolution of understanding, and wise people are open to that evolution and grow from it. We change our minds when confronted with evidence, whether it's global warming, racism, immigration, you name it. Life is a constant evolution of understanding if we are wise. But if we're cynics, we won't be open to that.
Skeptical, good. Cynical kind of puts you a little bit over the.
I think cynical is a sign of weakness. I think if I'm not open to truth, it means I'm not confident in my ability to discern truth, so I'll just be intractable. I don't have to deal with the truth if I just set my position and never waver from it.
Al, thank you so much. I appreciate all the insights and the thoughts. Al Tompkins from the Poynter Institute. A lot of great information in there. For just finally, I think as a last word here for the students, as they become journalists, for them, they're asking themselves those questions that you mentioned, honing those skills, and as consumers, they kind of have to do the same thing. Correct?
Right. Yeah, we are responsible in the same way that you're responsible for buying healthy food for your family. You're also responsible for feeding yourself a steady diet of reliable information. But I do urge you to occasionally expose yourself to things that you would be prone to disagree with. I occasionally listen to conservative talk radio. I'm mostly fairly liberal in my viewpoints. Not always. I'm a gun owner, which I think most people would call conservative. I'm not a gun nut, but I'm a gun owner. I grew up in rural Kentucky. I understand guns. I get guns. I'm not a hunter. I just take my son and I go to the target range about once a year and fire off some rounds, and it's fun. And then we put it away and forget about it for another year. But, I grew up in Kentucky, and I generally probably would consider myself more conservative on some issues, but fairly liberal on others. So I have to be constantly open to another way of thinking about things. If you typically find yourself being liberal, then I would urge you to flip on talk radio once in a while and just say, look, why do they think that? Why would somebody think that? Not so that you can make fun of them, but so that you can truly understand. I just spent the last week at the United Nations, and this is one of these things. I've been teaching at the United Nations with our friend Sarah Quinn, and I would ask yourself this as your students think about their next days ahead in your class: where in their life do they intentionally expose themselves to people with whom they normally would disagree or never encounter? My wife has a theory that the single most integrated place that most of us travel to go through is Southwest Airlines, right? You never know who you're going to sit next to, and you can't choose, right? Where else in your life do you intentionally place yourself in a position of having no control who you're surrounded with? And when you're there, do you actually listen to other points of view? Because most of us travel with people who are very much like us. We read people who we very much agree with. We eat dinner with people who are like us. When's the last time you had dinner with somebody who isn't like you? They don't look like you. They don't think like you. They are not at all like you. I used to ask questions all the time. When's the last time that you were in the home of someone who did not look like you? How did you feel about that? What did you learn from that experience? Now, in my family, that's easy because we have a multiracial family from Vietnam and China and Guatemala and so on. So all my kids are adopted from other countries. So it's easy for me to lay that challenge down. But ask yourself, how do you surround yourself with those who are not like you? And what do you learn from that? How are you?
And being open to taking some of those perspectives into your own. And
that's right. It'll make you a better consumer of news, back to the point. It'll make you a better consumer of the news because you'll say, not, I disagree with them, but wow, I wonder why they think that. I mean, the whole Alabama Senate race is just a mystery to me. How you could see a man courting a 14-year-old child and think that's somehow okay. It's just a mystery to me. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental. I'm saying that because I'm from the South. And I understand Southern culture, but I don't understand that. And I want to. I truly want to. I want to understand why that was okay, but I don't think I'm going to get that answer.
Great advice today and great information. Al, thank you very much.
My pleasure.